Okay, in the last video we learned how to take our character and make the character aware of mana. So basically he depended upon the mana to be able to cast fireballs. Now what I'd like to do is go ahead and put in place the infrastructure for a pickup system that is in the end going to provide mana potions throughout the level that the character can pick up. In doing this, we're going to be creating two new sprites, and you can see here from an old diagram that we are now revisiting is that from sprite we are deriving pickup. So pickup's derived from sprite, and then from pickup we're going to derive potion. Now we could also do arrow, key, etc. That's why they've been drawn down here, just as an examples of other items that can be picked up. But why did we not come off of sprite and go straight to potion, arrow, key, etc.? Well, I'd like to be able to say that an item that can be picked up within the level has the ability to respawn. Now, would you really need a key to respawn? No. When the character picks up a key, that key needs to be in the character's inventory and the character will carry it around. Arrows. Let's say you picked up some ammo, such as arrows. Would they need to respawn? Perhaps. Potions, the same exact thing. Perhaps. So by taking pickup and implementing a respawn system within the pickup class, then everything that's inherited from pickup has the ability to respawn if we would like for it to be able to respawn. So that's why we're doing it this way. And of course everything's being derived from sprite for the simple reason that anything that you can pick up within a level needs to be seen. So in the end it is indeed a sprite. So let's go ahead and jump over here to Word, where basically I've got the two classes just kind of loosely laid out. So in implementing the pickup class, what do we need? Well, we need to be able to set a spawn time and get a spawn time. These two things are going to be in charge of the whole respawning, if you will. So the moment we make something disappear because the character's walked over it, if it is something that needs to respawn, we'll go ahead and set a spawn time, and that spawn time is going to slowly count down, count down, count down, and as soon as it counts down to 0, then it's going to spawn back into the game and become visible again. So we'll be able to set the spawn time and of course be able to request what the spawn time currently is. Alright, set visible. This right here is going to determine if a character, let's say, has walked over a potion. That potion needs to disappear when the character steps off of it. It's no longer visible. In fact, it's in the middle of a respawn cycle if it has been set up in such a way that it can respawn. So we will use set visible to control a visible attribute of the pickup class. Okay, going on down from there, of course, we need to be able to get the visible status. Now, idle update and add player. Alright, this kind of brings up an interesting point where I can kind of stop for just a second in talking about the specific functions and mention one thing about pickup and all of the things we're going to implement from pickup, or all of the classes that are derived from it. And that is this. This system can be designed hundreds of different ways, easily. And, you know, the way that I'm doing it here, you may like, you may not like. The idea of the bonus content was to basically provide a way, a method, to implement a pickup type system and to give mana potions that a character can use when running around the level. It just kind of changes the whole strategy of gameplay, which makes the game a little bit more fun. Now, at the moment, the level itself, the level class, has not been set up in such a way that it handles real collision detection and things like that. So because of that, I would need to go back to level and implement some sort of collision detection if I wanted to basically watch the character as he walks around through the level and then steps over something and we know that he's collided with an object like a mana potion. But I decided against that method. What I'm going to do is I'm going to continue using the way that the system has been designed in regards to sprites, in that each sprite has its own idle update time, and in that idle update time basically we can decide what we need to do, if anything. And that actually allows us to do some interesting things with the items that are derived from pickup. Let me explain. With pickup, of course, we'll use idle time to determine if the item is in the middle of respawning. And if it is, we'll simply continue to count down its spawn time until it comes back into the level. Mana potion, though, with it, let's say that instead this was some sort of super health potion or something where a character needed to, or what the potion needed to do was basically make the character's health slowly increase, let's say a point every 15 seconds, and it'll continue to do that until 15 new points have been given to the character. Well, by implementing this, instead of doing a collision detection method, but by giving the items that are derived from pickup its own idle update, from inside there we could simply say if the character's got this item, then we're just going to, you know, give them some more health every yay many times we come through idle update. So in our case here, though, what we're going to do is with the pickup class, we're basically going to register the player. So we're going to know where the player is at all times. And during update, if we don't need to respawn, then what we're going to do is we're simply going to check to see if the character has stepped on top of us. So if a character is currently on top of us, being the mana potion, then we need to disappear. And if we're going to respawn, we need to basically set all that stuff up and disappear. Simple enough. So that's kind of the approach I'm taking. It's just a very simple approach, but again, it's just to provide an idea of how we can continue to expand the game to implement a pickup system. So with that, let's go ahead and jump over here into .NET. Now, the first thing I'd like to say is we're now to the point where if I came in here and spent 10 minutes typing out new classes, both the CPP files and the header files, I'm going to be spending a lot of time doing stuff that you guys have seen over and over. So what I've decided to do is go ahead and write up the CPP files and the header files, just put them in place, but not code in the functionality. So let's take a look at what I've done. Let's start down here with the header files. Up under game, I have created a pickup.h, and I've also created a mana potion.h. Inside of pickup.h, same things you guys have seen throughout this entire VTM. If not define pickup underscore h, define pickup underscore h so that we only worry about this guy one time. We're going to include sprite.h because we're going to need some of that functionality when we get over into the CPP file. Moving on down from there, coming on down, so class pickup, it's derived from Sprite, and then what's public, of course. Let's see, is there anything in here? Okay, so there's one thing inside of pickup here in the constructor that I've added that is new. So of course the level, the draw engine, sprite index, float x, float y. Now here's something new I've given it. I've given it a respawn true. So when I create a pickup item, I can specify if it can or cannot respawn. Again, as I said earlier, a key would not need to respawn. By default, all items are going to be able to respawn unless we specifically say otherwise. Okay, and of course, even though we're not going to use it, so here's our destructor. It's just in place. Set spawn time, and then we'll give it a time. It's just going to be an integer value. Get spawn time. It'll simply return the spawn time back. Set visible, and it'll bring in a typing error. Let's change that to bool viz. So it will bring in visibility, just a true or false, basically. And get visible status. Does not need to be void, it needs to be bool. Okay, so this is going to return back the visible status to us. Okay, so moving on from there, let's see what else we got here. Add player, of course we're going to send in a character, and then virtual void idle update. If you remember all the way back with Sprite, idle update is also virtual, allowing us to continue to overload, overload, and overload, and that's what we're going to do here. We're going to overload it all the way down at the mana potion. Some protected variables and functionality that we need. We've got items can respawn, okay, true or false, they can or they cannot. The spawn time until we do respawn back into the game, if it's currently visible or not. And then another function I've thrown in here, I guess we could neaten this up a little and move it up or down below all the variables, but that's okay. This one right here being a spawn reaction. This is going to be a function that is going to handle counting down for us as the item is preparing to respawn. And finally, our character so that we can register the character. I mean, if we wanted to have multiple characters, then we could perhaps make a list in here and register multiple characters so that when we went to check to see if a character was standing on top of a particular item, we just search the list. But right now, it's a single-player game, so we'll keep it nice and simple, register one player. So that's our pickup header. Now, let's go ahead and jump up here into the pickup.cpp file, and let's see, set, get spawn time, returns, get visible status. Let's go ahead and adjust this just like we did in the header file to return a boolean. And the only other thing was set visible. I changed this over there from VOS to viz. Why? Because it just makes more sense. Okay, so now let's go ahead and start coding in some functionality into the pickup.cpp file. So let's come all the way back up here to the constructor, and we'll start there. First thing I want to do, remember we have created the variable item can respawn. So let's go ahead and set that to whatever comes in on respawn here. So item can respawn equals respawn. Okay, good enough. Our spawn time, another variable that is going to contain how long until the item respawns. So spawn time equals 0. setting it to zero right off the bat, because if it's 0, that means the item does exist in the level. If it's anything other than 0, it needs to have a number decremented over and over and over until it hits 0, and at that point it then spawns back in. Again, like I said, a very, very basic system. All right, moving on down. Visible equals true. Of course, the item by default, if it's created, it needs to be visible. So we're going to go ahead and do that. Of course, all of this functionality could easily be changed later on if you wanted to. Perhaps items be created in a level that are invisible by default, and then they suddenly become invisible as the character progresses through that particular level. There's all sorts of things that we can do. All right, so moving on from there, I'm not going to be doing anything with the destructor. I've just left it in place just so it's there. Okay, set spawn time. Let's see. For setting the spawn time, what shall we do? Well, we're bringing in a time, so we can simply say that our spawn time is equal to the time that we bring in. Now, I'm also going to take visible and set it to false. And here's why. If I set spawn time, that is because I have just stepped, or a character has just stepped on that specific item. The item needs to disappear. I need to make sure that it's no longer visible and it's now ticking away to respawn, like such. Okay, get spawn time. Well, this one's really easy. All we really need to do is return the spawn time, like such. Okay, from there, set visible. Okay, this one might be seen as a little bit more complicated. Not really. So, visible is equal to, wait a minute, let's see, which one am I doing here? Get visible status is not going to be that. This one's going to be a lot simpler. I jumped down one. I mean to go right here. Just kidding. Okay, so visible, if I can spell here, is going to be equal to vis, what we send into it. Okay, now if vis, so if it is visible, what I want to do is this, I want to draw this sprite at position.x, comma, and position.y, like such. Otherwise, I want to erase it. So this, let's erase, and we're going to erase position.x, comma, position.y, using functionality from back in Sprite. So that's all we need to do with set visible. Are we going to draw it, or are we going to erase it? End of story. Okay. So coming down here now to get visible status, where I jumped down to a second ago, this one's going to be left to be quite simple with just a matter of return visible, return true or false. Is it currently visible or not? Okay, so now we're going to jump down to add player. Here's another tough one. Player equals P. Okay, oops. Both character pointers, character player pointers, if you will. So there we go. That's been set up. So we've now registered our player, if you want to look at it that way. All right, let's see. Idle update. What do we want to do inside of idle update? This is where we're going to need to come in and basically say if the item can respawn and spawn time is greater than 0. Because remember, like I said, if the spawn time is at 0, then the item is obviously visible, doesn't need to have anything counted down. So if this does happen, so in other words, the item can respawn and it's in the middle of counting down until it respawns back, then what we need to do is simply come in here and call our function spawn reaction, like such. So that leaves us with only one thing left to write, and that is spawn reaction. Again, let's keep this nice and simple. For spawn reaction, the first thing it needs to do is take that spawn time that we've assigned it and subtract 1 from it. And then simply check if spawn time is 0, or if not spawn time, or whatever. Then what we want to do is come in here and simply say, if it's equal to 0, now we need to put it back. So we can just simply say draw pos.x and pos.y, like such, and visible equals true. Okay? Or getting a little bit too carried away here, we could also just simply set the visibility up here with set visible and let all that handle it for us. But there we go. We get the idea. So moving on from there, that pretty much takes care of every single thing that we need to do inside of pickup.cpp. Now, what I want to do is go ahead and jump over to our mana potion header file and take a look at what we need to do in there. This one's actually going to be pretty simple. So mana potion.h. Inside here, same thing as always with the header file. Basically, if it's not defined, mana potion_h, define it, so it's only going to be included once. And then we're going to include pickup.h, of course, and also the class mage, because we're going to need to be aware of the mage. And then Coming down here in the constructor, basically what's going on, mana potion, level, the draw engine, the sprite index, float x, float y, and I'm sending in, here I go with my bad spelling again, value, and the value is going to be 6 by default. This is just setting the value of a specific mana potion, or at least giving us the ability to set that value. And by default, we're just going to say all mana potions are worth a value of 6 mana points. So your mana level will go up 6 points if you step on top of a mana potion. Okay. So from that now, basically what all do we have in here? Well, we only have one function that we're going to be worried about. And that one function is going to be idle update. And remember, we're overloading this coming in from our pickup class. And one private variable as well. And that's going to be int mana value. And that's going to hold the value that's coming into the constructor mana potion. So with that, let's go ahead and jump over to the CPP file, so manapotion.cpp, and inside here, let's go ahead and implement just a couple of things we need to do. Very simple stuff. So first thing, since of course we are dealing with a specific item that's going to be drawn in the level, we need to go ahead and give it a class ID, and that class ID needs to be mana potion underscore class ID, like such. Which, to be honest with you, just so I don't forget, let's go ahead and copy this real quick. And if you remember, all the way back up in Sprite.h, so Sprite.h, here's our enum that took care of all of our class IDs. Let's go ahead and add the mana potion class ID into Sprite, just so that we are now aware of who this guy is, or what his ID is anyways. Okay, coming back over to mana potion. So that's now in place. The next thing I want to do, of course, is that variable I just created that is private to this class, mana value. I want it to equal to the value that's coming in, which, as you guys saw a minute ago, that I needed to change the spelling here. There we go, value. And you know that that's going to be 6 by default unless we tell it otherwise. Okay, so from here, let's see, I'm not using anything with the destructor, but coming down to idle update, what are we going to be doing inside of idle update? Well, the first thing I want to do, of course, is pickup. Basically, I want to run the idle update for the pickup class itself, just so that it can handle all of the respawn stuff. So we'll go ahead and tell it idle update. And then I'm just going to say, if it's visible, what are we going to need to do? Well, I'm going to create a quick vector, player position. I'm going to find out where the player is. So player, what I want to do is get his position. And I'm going to create another vector variable, direction. Now what I want to do is I want to say if pos.x equals, as a matter of fact, thinking about this, let's make this even simpler. Let's go ahead and take direction out altogether. So if pos.x equals player underscore pos.x, so the position of me, my current item, the mana potion itself, is equal to the player's x, such, and the position of myself currently in y is equal to player underscore, position of him in y. So basically the player is now standing on top of me. Then what I'm going to do is I'm simply just going to come in here and say the spawn time is going to be 50. If you remember, we update, like, what is it? I think basically 10 times a second. So if we set it to 50, we're going to get 5 seconds until the item spawns back or respawns back. So that'll work fine. Of course, I want to go ahead and set the visibility of it to false. And go ahead and pull that back. And then let's go ahead and set the mana value. So let's make sure, since we're dealing with a character, let's go ahead and typecast this over to a mage pointer player. Now, what I can do is I can come in here and I can say set the mana, so I now have access to that. And what we want to do is set it to the mana value that has been established for this particular guy. Okay, like such. And that is really going to take care of what idle update is. Again, at the moment, visible right here, I could have also just called set visible as well. But the deal with that is I'm just going to let whatever item is being drawn get drawn, and I don't want to interfere with this. So in other words, if a monster steps on top of me, which all of that will make more sense in a few minutes when we get over into that part of the code. But this will basically set, oops, we don't want to do that. We want to do that. There we go. So this will allow us to set our spawn time to 50, make the item disappear, and set the player's value to go up 1. And at that point, then with each idle update, we're going to come through here with the pickup itself, and it will simply countdown, countdown, countdown until finally the spawn time hits 0, and when it does, we will make the item reappear. And with that, that's really going to wrap up this lesson, which just implements the base foundation for pickup class and for the mana potion class. Thanks a lot.